I had one idea that I'd spent 6 months developing, testing, refining. Late nights, early mornings, notebooks filled with plans. And in the span of about 45 minutes at a family dinner, my cousin Marcus took it. Not the rough version, not the concept, the whole thing, word for word. And he smiled at me the entire time. My name is Ethan. I'm 34 years old, and for most of my life, Marcus and I were close. Not just cousins, we were the kind of close where you'd tell each other things you'd never say out loud to anyone else. We grew up 2 streets apart. Same school, same group of friends for a while. We were 5 years apart in age. He was older, and that gap used to make him seem cooler to me when I was a teenager. He had this confidence, this way of walking into a room and making everyone feel like they wanted his attention. As an adult, I see that differently now. But back then, Marcus was one of my people, one of the few family members I actually chose to stay close to after I moved out and started my own life. I work in marketing. I've been freelancing for about 7 years. Brand strategy, content, positioning for small businesses and startups. It's not glamorous, but I built it from nothing, and I'm proud of it. About 2 years ago, I started developing something bigger, a side project that had the potential to become a real business. I'd noticed a gap in the market, a specific niche in the local food and beverage industry where small producers were completely invisible online. They had incredible products, artisan goods, small batch operations, family recipes passed down for generations, but zero digital presence, zero storytelling, zero connection to the consumers who would have paid a premium to find them. My idea was a platform, not just a directory, a content and marketing service packaged specifically for small producers who had no time, no budget, and no expertise to do it themselves. I'd handle the branding, the social presence, the storytelling. They'd pay a manageable monthly fee. I'd build it into a network. I called it Found Local. For 6 months, I worked on this in every spare hour I had. I built out the business model, I drafted service packages, I researched competitors, I designed the first version of the brand. I reached out to a few potential first clients just to test the concept, and the response was better than I expected. I was excited, more excited than I'd been about anything in years. And naturally, because Marcus was one of my people, I told him. It was a Sunday. We were at my aunt's place for a birthday dinner, her husband's 65th. The kind of big family gathering where the table seats 14 and there's always at least 2 conversations happening at once, and someone always ends up talking about something they shouldn't. Marcus and I ended up on the back porch after dinner with drinks in hand, just the two of us for maybe 40 minutes. And I talked. I didn't mean to go so deep into it, but I was genuinely proud of what I'd built, and Marcus kept asking questions. Good questions, specific ones. He wanted to know how the pricing worked, how I was planning to acquire clients, what the service packages look like, whether I'd thought about scaling beyond food and beverage into other craft industries. It felt like a conversation between equals, between two people who respected each other's thinking. He told me it sounded solid. He said, and I remember this clearly, he said, "Ethan, this might actually be the thing for you." And I felt good. I went home that night feeling lighter than I had in months. About 3 weeks later, I found out. A colleague of mine, a woman I'd worked with on a few projects named Dana, sent me a message. It was a screenshot. LinkedIn. A post. From Marcus. He'd announced a new business venture, a platform for small local food and beverage producers, a content and marketing service that would handle branding, social media, and storytelling for artisan businesses with no digital presence. He even used some of the same language I'd used when I described it to him. Not similar language, the same phrases, almost verbatim. He called it local roots. Dana's message said, "Ethan, did you see this? Isn't this basically what you told me you were working on?" I sat with my phone in my hand for a long time. I read the post 3 times. Then I went to his profile. He had already started to build out the brand. There was a logo, a website link, a short description that hit every single point I'd covered on that back porch, including the specific angle about small producers being invisible online. The thing that made me feel sick wasn't just the theft, it was the speed of it, the efficiency of it. He had taken my idea, gone home, and immediately started building. He hadn't hesitated. He hadn't felt conflicted. He didn't think about me at all. I called him that same night. He answered on the second ring, cheerful, like nothing had happened. And when I brought it up, he didn't even flinch. He said the idea had been floating around in his head for a while. He said it was a common concept in marketing and that plenty of people were doing similar things. He said I was reading too much into a coincidence. He said it calmly, almost bored. And that was the moment I understood who I was actually dealing with. For about 2 weeks after that call, I did nothing. I want to be honest about that, because the version of this story where I immediately sprung into action and executed some brilliant plan, that's not what happened. What actually happened is that I felt crushed, genuinely crushed. Not just angry, not just cheated out of a business idea. I felt like I misread a person I'd known for over 30 years. Like the friendship, the closeness, the trust, all of it was real to me, and apparently something very different to him. That's a strange kind of grief, when you lose a version of someone that only ever existed in your perception. I talked to Dana about it. She was the only person who knew the full picture. She'd heard me describe Found Local months before that dinner. She'd even given me feedback on the service packaging. She knew exactly what was mine and what Marcus had taken. She also said something that snapped me out of my paralysis. She said, "Ethan, he is out there right now building a business on your work. Every day you sit with this, he gets further ahead. You need to decide what you're going to do." She was right. I sat down and thought clearly for the first time since the screenshot. I asked myself, what do I actually want here? Do I want revenge? Do I want him to fail? Do I want compensation? No. What I wanted was for people to know the truth. And more than that, I wanted to actually build what I had planned. I wanted Found Local to exist and to be what it had always intended it to be. Not out of spite, because it was a good idea. My idea. And it deserved to be real. So I made 2 decisions. First, I was going to launch Found Local immediately. Not when I was ready. Now. Before he got any further ahead. Second, I was going to document everything. I went back through everything I had. 6 months of files. Notes, drafts, sketches, emails. I had timestamps on all of it. I had a folder of client conversations going back to before that Sunday dinner. I had a message thread with Dana where I described the concept in detail, with dates clearly visible. I organized all of it into a clean, simple document. Not to sue him, I'm not interested in a lawsuit, but to have a record that was undeniable. A record that showed clearly and chronologically that Found Local existed before Marcus had ever thought of local roots. Then I launched. I put up a basic website. I posted on LinkedIn. I reached out to the early contacts I'd already warmed up, and I was transparent in my launch post. I told the story of Found Local honestly. I talked about the 6 months of development. I shared some of the early work. I let the timeline speak for itself without naming anyone. I wasn't trying to destroy him. I was just making sure my work was visible. The response was immediate. Within 48 hours of my early contacts had signed on as clients. The post got more engagement than anything I'd ever put online. People in my network started messaging me, people I hadn't spoken to in years, congratulating me, asking questions, sharing the post. And then something interesting happened. One of those people who shared my post was connected to Marcus, a mutual contact, someone we both knew from the same industry circle. That person sent Marcus a message, I found out about this later, asking if he had seen my launch and whether Marcus's new project was related. Marcus replied that it wasn't, that they were completely different concepts. The mutual contact, who had been following my work for months and who had seen my earlier posts about what I was building, pushed back, said they looked pretty similar to him. That was the moment the thread started to unravel. Word got back to the family within about a week. Not through me. I hadn't told anyone in the family what had happened. But someone, I think another cousin who followed both of us online, noticed the similarity between the 2 businesses and started asking questions in a family group chat that I'm not even in. Apparently, it became a whole thing. My aunt called me. She was gentle about it. She's that kind of woman. She doesn't like conflict, and she always tries to find the middle ground. She asked me what was going on between me and Marcus. I told her calmly and factually. I didn't embellish. I didn't perform outrage. I just walked her through the timeline. I described the conversation on the back porch. I mentioned the phrases he'd used that were nearly identical to mine. I told her about calling him and his response. She went quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Ethan, I believe you." That was enough. I didn't need more from her than that. What happened after that, in the family dynamics, the conversations, the sides people quietly chose, that wasn't something I controlled or engineered. That happened on its own, because the facts were the facts. Marcus reached out to me once more. A text message. It said, "This has gotten out of hand. Can we talk and straighten this out?" I didn't respond. Not out of cruelty. There just wasn't anything to straighten out. He knew what he had done. I knew what he had done. A conversation at that point would have been a performance for his benefit, not a genuine resolution. Found Local has been running for just over a year now. I have 11 clients. I've brought on a part-time contractor to help manage the content side. It's not a massive operation, but it's real, it's growing, and every single part of it was built by me. Local Roots, Marcus's version, launched with some initial activity and then went mostly quiet. His LinkedIn post stopped after a couple of months. The website is still up, but hasn't been updated. I don't think about it much. The relationship between Marcus and me is gone. That's the part of this that still has some weight to it when I sit quietly and think. Not grief exactly, more like an acknowledgement. Some things, once broken, don't get repaired. Not because the wound is too deep, but because the repair would require the other person to be honest about what they did. And Marcus has never shown any sign of being willing to do that. The family has mostly moved on. My aunt and I are still close. A few other relatives have been quietly supportive without making it a big dramatic declaration. Life continues. Here's the thing I didn't mention until now. About 4 months after I launched Found Local, I was going through old messages on my laptop, cleaning out old folders, and I found a conversation thread, a group message from 2 years before that Sunday dinner. It was a thread between Marcus, me, and 2 other people, and in that thread, I had mentioned briefly, casually, the kernel of the idea that would become Found Local. Something like, I've been thinking about doing something for small local food businesses, helping them get visible online. Marcus had responded with a single word, interesting. That was it, just interesting. He had been sitting on that seed for over a year before I told him the full plan on that back porch. He hadn't forgotten it, he'd filed it away. And the moment I gave him enough detail to act on it, he did. That changes nothing about what he did, but it told me something about how his mind works. He hadn't stolen from me impulsively. He'd been patient. He'd waited until I handed him everything he needed. Knowing that actually made me respect my own instincts more, because some part of me, something I couldn't name at the time, had always felt a slight guardedness around Marcus, a small, quiet voice that I ignored, because he was family, because he was one of my people. Listen to that voice, especially when the person on the other end of it is family. If this story hit close to home, if you've ever been betrayed by someone who smiled to your face, drop it in the comments. I read every single one. And if you're new here, hit subscribe. Real situations, real consequences, and occasionally, real justice. I'll see you in the next one.